Are you ready?
Oh yeah!
From parts unknown and into your home, this is the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. Now, here's your host, Groovy G.
Hello there folks, on this episode of the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast, one of the most popular and most bootleg belts of all time. I'm talking of course about a real Jmar made WWF Attitude Era Big Eagle. That's coming your way right now.
You're watching the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast. For your official Groovy G Belt Podcast merchandise, check out www.groovyGshop.com.
Introduced on the March 30 edition of Raw is War 1998, the Big Eagle was the first new world title belt for a decade. Stone Cold Steve Austin had just defeated Shawn Michaels the previous night at WrestleMania 14, where he was handed the last and slightly damaged Winged Eagle title from special guest referee Iron Mike Tyson. On the next night on Raw, Vince McMahon presented the new belt to Stone Cold. Now, there were a couple of similarities between this new belt and the Winged Eagle. Firstly, it was still a 5-plate belt, one large main plate, 4 small side plates and a logo plate, and both belts featured an eagle on the main plate, but the Big Eagle on this new belt, as the name suggests, was bigger. It also didn't have those twisted sidebars, with the main plate being completely round, and the original Big Eagle that debuted after WrestleMania 14 had the WWF block logo, and it was on a blue strap with a maroon crocodile backing. As the WWF adopted its new Attitude Era logo, the old block logo was replaced, and the belt was also put onto a black strap. Now, unlike some belts of the past, several of these title belts were made, so there were also some subtle differences in those belts used on TV. Most noticeably, a blue suede backing during one of Triple H's runs. There was sometimes different painting on the side plates, and also sometimes different tooling around the border of the belt and also in the snap boxes. Now, the Big Eagle was made by a belt maker by the name of Joe Marshall, or Jmar as he's known in the hobby, just like this belt that you see in front of you right now. Now, Jmar stopped delivering belts to the general public and has only very recently returned to the belt making scene. Because Jmar took orders but didn't deliver, there was an unwritten rule in the belt collecting community that Jmar belts could be bootlegged. Illegal and unauthorized copies of his designs could be made because he had ripped people off. So the scarcity, not just the price, combined with those outstanding orders, saw this and a block logoed version of this belt bootlegged relentlessly. Let's take a closer look at this particular belt, and if we start on the left hand side, we can see the Jmar signature stamp on the male snap boxes. Now, one thing that is slightly different on this belt compared to other belts is that Jmar has stamped his signature stamp into both ends of this particular belt. Another interesting fact is the snap box itself. This bubble design is actually one large leather stamping tool that has been laid down and stamped onto the leather, rather than tiny individual stamps making the texture in the snap boxes. If we move across, we can see the smaller side plate with the WWF scratch logo. This belt also has the scratch logo tooling all around its border. Now, in the background, we can see a texture. This texture is added by hand using a Dremel tool after the plates have been etched, but before they're plated. Now, this part being inaccurate is usually one of the biggest telltale signs that the belt is a bootleg and not the real deal. Here's the larger side plate with the lion. Again, it has that texture near the WWF logo. And here's the main plate. And it too has that same texture in the eagle's wings. This belt has the scratched WWF logo, and like I mentioned before, the original belt had the block logo up the top. These black areas that you see on the sides here were also sometimes completely cut out on some earlier versions, then they were just painted black like on this one. Here we have the words World Wrestling Federation and the Latin words, which roughly translates to Champion of the Century or Champion of a Lifetime, and the large English word Champion down the bottom. Now, on a previous episode of the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast, we spoke to the King of Belts, Reggie Parks, who told us that he and his etchers at Tucson Trade Engravers used various clip art to assemble the artwork for their belts. Also, on a previous episode of the Groovy G Championship Belt Podcast, we spoke with Adam Icon Gibbons, who told us through his research he had found those actual elements used by Reggie Parks in designing his belts. Now, Icon has also found clip art elements used by Jmar in his title belts. And here are some of those elements right now. This is the same eagle's head used by Jmar on this belt and also on the World Tag Team title belts that he made for WCW. And if we move down to the globe, this here is the clip art of the exact same globe used by Jmar in making this belt. If you haven't already done so, you need to make sure that you check out my other interviews with both Adam Icon Gibbons and Reggie Parks that you can find right here on this YouTube channel. Now, getting back to the belt, let's move over to the side plates on the right hand side, and we can see a mirrored lion. This time it's holding a shield with the McMahon family crescent with the Dremel texture in the background. Here's the smaller side plate. This is exactly the same as the side plate on the left hand side, however, because that Dremel texture has been done by hand, the texture in the background is not exactly the same. And here is the logo plate, and various logo plates with different years were used on the ring used belts. And if we move along here to the female snap boxes, we can see that same snap box tooling as the male side, and the Jmar signature stamp. So there we have it. That is a real Jmar made WWF Attitude Era Big Eagle with the added bonus for all of you good people watching the Groovy G Championship Belt podcast. Some actual real clip art used by Jmar when designing this belt. Now, let's take a sneak peek at what's coming your way on the next Groovy G Championship Belt podcast.
On the next episode of the Groovy G Championship Belt podcast.
What's up, guys? This is Hazard F5, aka That YouTube Belt Guy. Join me on the next episode of the Groovy G's Championship Belt podcast.
That's right, folks. The YouTube guy himself, Hazard F5, joins us right here on the next episode of the Groovy G Championship Belt podcast. In the meantime, make sure you don't miss a thing by subscribing to this YouTube channel, and you can also join in the conversation on Twitter at Groovy G Belt Show or on Facebook. Until then, take care. It's bye for now.